Hello to my beautiful family of light. Yes, that means you. Welcome to my channel. My name is Claudia and I'm glad to have you here. You'll have to excuse my voice because I'm getting over a cough, a persistent cough, and it's just giving me a little trouble. So I'm going to work with it, not fight it. So welcome and happy to have you here, as I said. And I am doing edits on my book, and one of the things I came across recently was a chapter in which I'd written, "Withholding Love Has Consequences." And I knew exactly what chapter that was and the event that took place. And so I want to talk a little bit about that today. In 1991, let's see, was it 92 that my mother transitioned? Yeah, it was. I think it was it was May of 92. And my brother was moving from New York back to Washington State to be closer to the family. He was quite ill and, in fact, not expected to have much more of a life before him, and he wanted to be back where his family could take care of him. And so he flew to New Mexico. From New Mexico, another brother and that brother's son brought my youngest brother up to Wyoming, where I lived, and my dad drove over from the West Coast to meet everybody and then to drive the brother who was ill back. Okay, so that's just a setup to the story. My dad and I had no time together. Let's see, this is 92, May of 92, and so since 1972, so we're talking 20 years together, ever since his second marriage. And of course, kids move out of the house. I'd gotten married, stuff time marches on. And we ended up with 4 days together before, might have been 5 days, before the other brothers were expected to come up and join us. And so my dad and I had a great time. Spring in the Rocky Mountains is absolutely a delightful time. You never, excuse me, know if you're going to get a little bit of snow or rain, but usually the skies are blue, 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 and the clouds big and white and fluffy. And the mountains still have snow and the sun during the day at 5,000 feet and up higher where those peaks are. The spring rain runoff, has begun, and the rivers are just gorgeous and overflowing. So there's lots of things to see and do. We spent a lot of time. We even went out dancing a couple times, went to a couple of museums and saw some of the Western kinds of things going on. And then the boys were expected the next day. So, and my dad and I have always gotten along. We have a great relationship. He had 6 sons, and I think I was the 7th. I preferred climbing trees and doing the things the boys could do. And in fact, I learned how to fly so that I could be piloting with him as my dad took trips to all different kinds of places. Anyhow, that aside, we got along great. And the night before the other 3 were coming, he put the paper down all of a sudden, and he said, I have 6 strapping sons. He got my attention, and I'm paying attention now. And he said, of all the boys, he said, I wish one of them had an oomph of your spirit of adventure. And that was a real compliment for sure. And then he got very quiet, and a tear came down out of his eyes, and he said, of all my children, you're the only one who's never asked me for anything. And began to cry. Now, I had an epiphany in that moment, and I'm going to tell you about that. But I went over to him and got down to where I put my head on his knee, and I looked up at him and I said, the only thing I've ever wanted from you is love. And he's been very good about that. So, story goes on, the boys come, we have fun, and off they go. But I realized, here's the epiphany, that in 1972, something happened between my dad and I, in which he made a decision about me and my life, in which he did not consult me. And I was, so pleased with the choice and the decision I'd made, and he undid that. And in doing so, I made an unconscious choice, or I'm going to say decision, because this isn't a choice. A choice, we'll talk about the distinction another time. I made a decision that I would never ask him for another thing as long as I lived. And thus went up a brick in the wall that was built between us. Now, interestingly, we always got along. This to me was like how I tried to teach my son. You don't condone the behavior, but you never stop the love. So keep the love going. It's the behavior that you're having trouble with, and you want a correction in that. Dad and I never got a chance to do that, but I realized as soon as he said I had never asked him for anything, and that was the exact memory that came to my mind, was I had bought a car. He didn't think it was the right choice. He traded it in without asking me, and I was from an old world Italian household in which you did not challenge your father. And so, but I was devastated. It really did. So, okay, that within 2 years, then I was getting ready to move back to Washington to help out with some family matters. And I was talking to, who was I talking to? One of my brothers, and I had decided I would, as a transitional place, I would go from where I was in the Rocky Mountains to Oregon first for a few months, and then on up to Washington. And so I knew immediately what I had to do. So I called my dad, and I said, would you like to come and help me move? Or at least, drive a vehicle or help with the truck or something. And there was silence, and you could tell. In fact, it felt like a cloud had lifted. And he said, absolutely. And that's, the rest is history. He called all my brothers and rounded up the troops to come and rescue me, right? I called it the Cavalry coming. You may have even heard this story, but the consequence is that what I realized, and let's see, if that's in 92, then that would have made me 41 at that point. And so here I am, 41, and after 20 years of, building that different walls, and you're not letting love in, you're not letting your love out. Things are starting to, the decision that you've made means that you're not free to love. You're not free to give everything you have to give. You're not free to receive every possible way that you can receive. And in the realization of that and correcting that mistake, the wall, that particular brick or 10, dozen bricks or however many went up, were able to be moved aside, and the opening up was created. Now, this is a choice that, or a decision that I made. A choice is because somebody says, what kind of ice cream do you want? And you're like, man, there's so many options. Maybe I'll have pistachio today, or what sounds good? And they're like, well, why would you want to eat that? And you're like, this sounds good. There's not even a good reason. It's because that is what I choose. And when we make decisions, they're typically based on I'm going to say a logical, linear, rational style of thinking. Now, it doesn't have to be right, doesn't have to be correct. It's just something that you've decided. And when pain or suffering is attached to it, in this case, it felt like about the biggest betrayal that could have possibly happened, in that you feel totally incapable, not worthwhile, couldn't have made a worse decision. Your dad had to step in and fix it. And none of that's true. None of it's true. You're not any of those things. I wasn't any of those. And I went on to prove that in the 20 years of living my life and getting married and having a child and whatnot. Love flows freely, but when you're in communication with that individual, there's a barrier, there's a distance. You've said, I'm only going to go this far. I'm only going to take this many steps. I'm not going to step beyond that. And so the consequence is that you're closing yourself off to potential remarkable, even better than anyone could ever have expected relationship. It did get resolved, and Dad and I knew, that there were wonderful, wonderful times between us, and that we were probably more alike than any of the other kids in the system, the Carabba system. So anyhow, that's my message to you today. This can be your work, your friendships, your interactions at the grocery store, your spouse, your significant other, your children, whatever. When you do something that is painful, we have a tendency to put up a wall that blocks any more from getting in. But at the same time, when you put up a wall, you're not allowing yourself the freedom of complete expression either. So be aware of that. Look back in your own life at places where you wish you maybe had made a different decision, and it's easy to undo it. I've never had any problem once I sort of sorted something out in saying I was really sorry that had happened and that I had handled that so poorly. If I had been wiser and more experienced at that time, I wouldn't have allowed it. I was of age. I just was, well, you could say incompetent to some degree, and that wouldn't surprise me either. Anyhow, I love you so much. Your lives, our lives, have all kinds of dynamics in them. Make your choices and decisions feel right. Make meaning that it doesn't, you're not building barriers, you're pulling them down at this point in your life. And it doesn't matter if you're 15, 26, or 42, or 73. So thank you for joining me today. Please like and subscribe. Those are the two things that you can do that help me in this channel. And until we meet again, Know that you are loved beyond your imagining. Be well, be safe, be happy, and be the light that you were designed to be. I will see you next time.